I'll see you soon.
Final Destination 3, the novelization by Christa Faust. Chapter 24. A couple of 12-year-old boys, a redhead and a blonde, charged out of the Tricentennial Fair crowd toward Kevin, mock sword fighting with hissing, spitting sparklers. Before Kevin could react, the redhead trapped the blonde against the barricade. The blonde ducked under, and the redhead made to follow. Kevin's blood ran cold. "Hey!" he shouted, running over and grabbing their arms. "Dude, get out of here with those things. You want to set that shit off?" He gestured at the mortar tubes. The kids looked around at the huge array of fireworks and grinned like cute little angels. "That would fucking rock," said the redhead. "Fucking A," said the blonde. "Jesus," Kevin said. "I got news for you kids. Getting your face blown off does not fucking rock. In fact, it fucking sucks. Get the hell out of here, will ya?" "Fuck you," said the redhead, and ran off with the blonde kid, still sword fighting with the white-hot sticks. Kevin swallowed and passed a hand over his eyes. There was one potential death avoided. He started scanning the crowd again as he tried to push his heart beat back down closer to normal. He wondered where Julie was. He scanned the ever-moving crowd, trying to pick out her petite, curvy figure from the sea of petite, curvy figures that strolled through the fairgrounds. Why did all girls in McKinley have to dress exactly the same? Was there a bulletin that was posted somewhere? "This week we all wear bright-colored hoodies, hip-hugger jeans, baby tees, and pink sandals with plastic flowers on the toes." 3 girls were goofing around with mylar balloons, bouncing them off the heads of 3 boys, but Kevin couldn't get a good enough look at the girls. He stood on tiptoe. One of the boys grabbed a balloon and rubbed it on the baby-fine blonde hair of one of the girls. "Ah!" she cried, jerking away. "It shocked me! Get off!" She pushed the boy's arm away, and the static of the balloon caused her hair to stick to it, rising up off her head like the Bride of Frankenstein. Her friends laughed. Then all started rubbing the balloon on each other's hair. None of them, however, was Julie. Kevin cursed. Where was she? He wished he could leave his post, but orders were orders. Surely she had to walk by sometime. The fair wasn't all that big. He just wanted it to happen now. He had to warn Julie about the danger of what she was facing before it was too late, though he didn't know what he was going to tell her. Without Wendy's pictures to back up the story, it all sounded pretty lame. And what was supposed to happen to Julie anyway? Wendy hadn't told him any details about Julie's picture. Christ, it could be anything, anything. A loud voice beside him made him jump. "The British are coming! The British are coming!" Kevin spun around. An actor dressed as Paul Revere was spurring his horse through the crowd, holding aloft an old-style lantern with a bright, modern 60-watt bulb inside it. Well, yes, he thought, as Revere dismounted and tied his skittish horse to a metal 6-foot T-post. That was an option. Julie could be the first person in McKinley in over a century to be trampled to death by a horse, or there were so many deaths to choose from. Across the way, a fat, red-faced barbecue chef was crying his wares from his kiosk. The chef hefted a large raw slab of dripping ribs and laid it across a black, cut-in-half oil can barbecue grill. Kevin had a sudden vivid flashback to the slab of human ribs he had seen at the scene of the roller coaster crash. The smoky aroma of charring meat from the grill sent waves of powerful nausea through Kevin's belly, closing his throat and filling his mouth with a hot gush of metallic saliva. He squeezed his eyes shut and concentrated every ounce of effort he had on not puking. When Kevin was able to open his eyes and swallow normally again, he looked back over at the barbecue chef. The fat man stood over his grill, a long, wicked steel fork gripped in one hand. He wore a stained apron emblazoned with stylized flames and chili peppers that read, "Hotter than hell." Distorted behind the heat waves coming off the grill, he looked like some greasy, obese devil presiding over a lake of fire. The tines of the fork and the tips of the shish kebab skewers glinted menacingly in the twilight. As Kevin watched, the chef turned the knob of the portable propane tank under the grill. Death by impalement, death by fire. Next to him, a burly, bearded man dressed as a colonial blacksmith pounded on a white heart horseshoe while holding it steady with iron forceps. Sparks flew and bounced and scattered all over the place, dropping into the straw at his feet. His left foot pumped the bellows of a glowing forge. It roared like a dragon. Another death by fire. Further down the way, two younger guys dressed as colonial militiamen were stacking heavy iron cannonballs into triangular stacks beside their field pieces. Behind them, a squad of uniformed soldiers marched in time to a young boy rapping out a beat on a drum. Each of the soldiers carried a gun, but Kevin had no idea if they were actually working firearms or just replicas. Their sergeant drew his razor-sharp saber as he called out company halt. Death by cannonball, death by gunfire, death by sword. An eerie flapping sound like the beat of a giant bird's wings made Kevin spin around. A chubby Ben Franklin impersonator in a bad wig and granny glasses was paying out the string of a big kite while a crowd of onlookers craned their necks to watch it rise. Ben was standing next to a spherical contraption of glass, brass, and steel. He grinned at the audience. "Now," he said, "let's hope for some lightning." "Death by electrocution," Kevin groaned. "Great," he muttered. "Thanks, Ben." He returned to scanning the crowd. Julie had to be there somewhere. Wendy slammed on the brakes of her truck as an old couple in a Buick in front of her came to a sudden stop. She was in the lot of the park where the tricentennial celebration was being held, and it was jam-packed with morons of every stripe. The old geezer in the Buick was apparently waiting for the lady in the minivan to pull out of the space on the left, even though there were clearly more open spaces just a little further down the road. Wendy pounded the steering wheel. Now the lady in the minivan was arguing with the kids in the back seat. She hadn't even started her car yet. What a nightmare. Wendy had to get into that fair. She had to find Julie. She looked to the left and right. There wasn't enough room to get around the Buick, so she laid on the horn. Frustration building. The old guy in the Buick ignored her, but the lady in the minivan gave her a dirty look. Fine, whatever. As long as she got moving, she could give all the dirty looks in the world. The lady put her seatbelt on with deliberate slowness, then backed carefully out of the space, and at last put her van in first and drove away. The old guy in the Buick signaled left and then eased in with all the speed and caution of a space shuttle pilot docking with the MIR. Julie's hands white-knuckled the wheel. Were these more of Death's playful delaying tactics? Was it enjoying her torment as it tossed one obstacle after another into her path? The Buick finally edged into the parking space and Wendy roared ahead, then slammed on her brakes again as she nearly ran down an entire family dressed like pilgrims. There was an irony she didn't need right there. Killing 5 people on the way to saving her sister from imminent death. The pilgrims passed, cheerful and oblivious, and Wendy surged ahead again, then slewed into a parking space, stomped on the parking brake, and slammed out of her door. As she hurried across the crowded parking lot, she remembered the car behind her, the song and the blacked-out rearview mirror. She looked back over her shoulder. There were tons of cars, tons of people. She had no idea if one of them might be the one that had been following her. She ran on toward the bright lights of the fair. A pair of colonial soldiers walked past Kevin as he continued to scan the crowd. They were carrying flagpoles topped with large and ornate brass eagle finials. The poles had the banner of the McKinley Minutemen stretched between them, a coiled snake on a blood-red background, with the motto "Liberty or Death" emblazoned upon it. As they marched up the low rise toward the drilling soldiers and the cannon, Kevin saw, partially obscured by the banner, 3 girls walking and flirting with 3 guys. He ducked his head to look under the banner. Success. The girl in the middle was Julie. Kevin looked around to make sure nobody was about to rush the barricade, and then wove swiftly through the crowd toward the 6 kids. Behind him, from the corner of a tent, Officers Clark and Polanski watched him intently. Polanski pointed at Julie. Clark nodded. Kevin stopped in front of the 6 kids. He felt a flush of embarrassment as he noticed that Julie was dressed in a very sexy outfit. a microscopic skirt, and a sheer scrap of a top that accentuated rather than covered her abundant endowments. She was not wearing a bra. He fought to keep his eyes on her defiant face as he pointed to her, Amber, and Perry. "You three have to come with me," he said, hoping his voice sounded more authoritative than he felt. "What for?" Julie asked. Kevin knew Julie would tell that he was flustered by her braless display and was working it for all it was worth. She was hot and she knew it. She grinned and crossed her arms beneath her breast, lifting them up until they seemed to be straining towards him. "We didn't do nothing." "Yeah," Perry echoed. "We didn't do nothing." "Look," Kevin said, keeping his gaze averted from Julie's nipples like they were the eyes of the Gorgon. "I'll explain that after you come with me, okay?" "Well," Amber said, "we're not coming with you until you explain." The three boys closed in around the girls, suddenly territorial. The tallest of the three was a good-looking kid with the wise-ass smirk and a brown and orange trucker hat that read, "Original Soul Brother," even though he was as wide as Ian McKinley. "Fuck off, Rent-A-Cop," he said. "They don't have to go nowheres with you." His two underlings slapped hands and made toadying noises of agreement. Kevin ignored them, staying focused on Julie. "It's for your own safety, Julie," Kevin said. "Can you please just trust me on this?" "My," Julie narrowed her eyes at him. "Is this some paranoid crap my sister put you up to? There aren't any stupid rides here, okay? I'm not gonna have a fucking heart attack. I'm just walking around." Unnoticed behind them as they argued, one of the colonial soldiers put a final cannonball on top of a pyramid of shot and turned around to build another one. While his back was turned, the weight of the top cannonball pushed the three below it apart, and it plopped down onto the grass, then rolled down the slope toward the firework mortars. It traveled under the plastic barricade and continued on toward the two-wheeled flatbed trailer, with the double bank of mortars mounted on it. The firework technicians didn't notice it. They were too busy talking on their walkie-talkies and making final preparations for the big show. 10 seconds to go time, one of the technicians said. "Roger," said another. "Primed and ready." The cannonball slowed as the ground leveled and it began to lose impetus. It rolled slower and slower until it finally came to a stop, clunking against the metal rod that was propped under the flatbed, and which held it steady. It wasn't a hard rap, but it was enough. The metal rod was knocked out of position and fell with a thump in the grass next to the cannonball. Above it, the flatbed trailer teetered slightly downward in the direction of the crowd. "This has got nothing to do with the heart attacks. You just have to trust me. You're in danger and I need to get you out of here." "That's total bullshit, dude," the original Soul Brother said. "You're just trying to mac on our chicks." "Yeah," said one of the lesser boys. Yeah, right," said the other. "You're like totally abusing your power, dude. Go find your own hookup." 7 seconds, said the fireworks technician. Kevin ignored the boys and took Julie's arm. "Julie, please," he said. "Just come with me, and Get the fuck off me!" She yanked her arm away from him. "I'm not going anywhere!" Kevin made to grab her arm again. Unbeknownst to him, Officers Polanski and Clark had spotted the scuffle, exchanged a look, and started toward Kevin. Further down the path, Wendy was cutting through the crowd, head high, looking in every direction at once. She finally spotted Kevin, and then, as she focused on him, she also saw Julie. "Kevin!" she shouted. "Julie!" She started pushing faster through the crowd toward them, moving as quickly as she could. But before she was able to reach them, all the lights in the fair dimmed to black, and a loud voice echoed from the public system.
"Ladies and gentlemen," said a booming, friendly voice. "Welcome to the newly tricentennial celebration fireworks extravaganza. And here we go!"
The crowd cheered and people began surging for the picnic field to find seats. Wendy was jostled and knocked this way and that as the flow of the crowd suddenly reversed. She fought against the tide of bodies, stumbling over a kid in the dark and cursing under her breath. On the flatbed, an electronic match fired, and with a loud hiss, a firework rocketed out of a mortar tube and shot into the air, Following Newton's third law, which stated that every action causes an equal and opposite reaction, the now unstable flatbed trailer tilted down under the pressure of the rocket's exhaust, and the bank of mortars lowered a few more inches toward the crowd on the path. The firework exploded in the sky, blossoming into a glittering red, white, and blue flower of fire, to the applause of the crowd. The scene lit up before Wendy in harsh black and white. Kevin trying to pull Julie away. Paul Revere's horse tethered near Kevin and Julie, jerking skittishly, and backing up at the noise. Officers Clark and Polanski were also moving in like sharks. Then all was darkness again. She pushed forward, shouting but unheard. One of the boys with Julie, Amber, and Perry noticed the frightened horse and nudged the others. He pulled an M80 firecracker out of his pocket and held it up. The original Soul Brother grinned maliciously and nodded. The first boy lit the M80 and threw it under the horse's feet. It went off just as another firework went off overhead. The horse screamed and reared, then tried to bolt. The rope tethering him to the T-post pulled tight. Then he yanked it out of the ground. The horse charged through the crowd as people threw themselves out of its way. The T-post bounced violently across the uneven ground, banging into people's shins and elbows. Two men tried to grab the horse's reins, but just then another firework exploded, and the horse reared in reverse directions, heading back the way it had come. Wendy dodged around a family that stood gawking in the center of the path, staring upward, slack-jawed at the fireworks bursting in the sky. She had almost reached Kevin and Julie. Julie was ripping her arm away from Kevin, furious, as Clark and Polanski got closer. "Let me put it this way," Julie shouted at Kevin. "Maybe you'll be able to understand." She raised the middle fingers of both hands to give him the double bird, glitter-polished nails raised and tongue out. Wendy sucked in a startled gasp. Julie had recreated exactly the image in the photo Wendy had taken of her at the amusement park that awful night. A firework erupted above them, illuminating the scene, as if a flashbulb had gone off. Wendy felt the presence of death all around her. "Julie, look out!" she screamed, just as Clark and Polanski took Kevin firmly by both arms, shouting in his ear over the whistling roar of the fireworks. Julie clearly didn't hear her. Wendy hurried forward again, but the terrified horse charged past her, nearly knocking her flat. Clark and Polanski saw it coming and pulled Kevin out of the way and threw him down. Julie looked up and dived to the ground at the last second as Clark and Polanski tried to grab the horse. The horse reared just like the image on Julie's t-shirt in her photo. The horse raced past, easily dodging the cops. Julie raised herself up on her elbows and looked around. The T-post at the end of the horse's rope was bouncing toward her point first. She ducked and it spun over her head, but the rope caught her across the neck and wrapped around. Julie choked as she was jerked backward and dragged behind the horse. "No!" Wendy screamed. "Julie! Kevin! Kevin, stop the horse!" Kevin jumped to his feet and lunged for the horse, but another concussive firework went off, spooking the horse and causing it to change direction once again. The rope slackened around Julie's neck, and she raised her hand to pull the rope away. But before she could get it off, the horse charged away again, and the loop of rope tightened around her arm as well as her neck. The horse dragged her in this awkward position toward an exhibit of colonial farm tools. Screaming in pain and fear, Julie saw an antique hay baler, all sharp meshing steel rods and heavy gears gaping like the mouth of an iron dragon. "Julie!" Kevin cried. He turned and ripped the saber from a passing Minuteman's sheath. He raced after the horse, slashing down at the rope with the sword and chopping through it. Julie skidded to a stop only inches from the hay baler's iron teeth. The horse plunged on, knocking colonial farmers left and right, and veered toward some tents. Julie gagged and choked and tried to regain her breath. The Minuteman ran after Kevin. "Hey, give that back!" he shouted, gesturing to the sword. Officers Clark and Polanski finally managed to get in the way of the horse. Clark caught the rope and Polanski caught the bridle, and they slowed the panicked horse, while behind him, Wendy, Amber, and Perry ran to Julie and crowded around her. Kevin argued with the Minuteman. Tie it off, Polanski said. Our first priority is that kid. Clark nodded and quickly lashed the horse to one of the poles that held up the Liberty or Death banner. Wendy knelt beside Julie and lifted her head into her lap. Julie, she said, are you okay? Julie's face was sweaty and pale, with high red blotches like theatrical rouge on her paper-white cheeks. She clutched weakly at the left side of her chest, gasping. I need, she whispered through clenched teeth. Meds. My purse. Shit, Wendy cursed, looking all around them. Where's Julie's purse? She must have dropped it, Amber said. Is it her heart? Perry asked, terrified. Yes, Wendy said, struggling to stay calm. Run back to where you were standing and see if you can find her purse. Go, now! Julie, Wendy said, stay with me, kiddo, come on. I need you to keep breathing. Looking down at Julie's chest, and she saw that she was wearing her heart-shaped necklace, with the fighter side facing up. Julie's eyes were glassy, unfocused. Come on, come on, come on, come on, Wendy said, panic, fear, and frustration all filling up inside of her. Julie, be a fighter. I need you to. Another firework exploded directly overhead, drowning out the end of her sentence. Behind her, the horse reared and charged again, trying to get away from the frightening sounds. The flagpole bent like a bow as the horse pulled on the rope. Then, as the pressure became too much, it ripped out of the ground and launched like a javelin, past the horse, banner fluttering behind it like a wing. Perry appeared at that moment, triumphant with Julie's tacky pink plastic purse. I found it, she said. Julie, Wendy, I found the purse! Wendy did not get a chance to respond. Before she could open her mouth, something flashed through the air behind Perry's shoulder. Suddenly, a brass eagle erupted from Perry's sternum, smackling Julie and Wendy with blood and bits of bone. The eagle's wings were caked with gore and spongy lung tissue. Blood dripped from the pointed tip of the decorative finial. Perry gaped down at the metal sticking out of her body, tottering on her knees as her bodily functions began to shut down. The pink purse slipped from her fingers and fell into the bloody dirt. Oh, Julie, she said. She collapsed sideways and sprawled on the grass, the flag draping over her. Blood began to soak through the words liberty or death. Wendy stared at Perry's body, horrified as this latest brutality dovetailed perfectly into the deadly pattern. An eagle and a flag, just like the design on her t-shirt in the photo. Wendy shook her head and snapped herself forcibly out of it. Reaching for the gore-slick purse, she fumbled with the catch and began frantically sorting through the mess inside. Julie was always so disorganized. Wendy tossed aside gum and lipstick, Julie's cell phone, uncharged of course, pens and scraps of paper, crumpled receipts and keys, and a single condom in a bright foil wrapper. Condom? Wendy couldn't help but think. Why would Julie need a condom? Finally, at the very bottom of the bag, Wendy's fingers found the orange plastic vial that held Julie's emergency meds. She pawed at the child-proof cap, struggling to open the damn thing, until finally it popped open, spilling the jaunty, candy-colored pills in the grass around her knees. She scrabbled in the dirt for one and then another, and forced them between Julie's bluish lips. Swallow, Wendy said. Come on, you need your meds, Julie, please. Swallow. Julie obediently dry-swallowed the pills, and for a few moments the two of them were alone in the still eye of the storm. Are you okay? Wendy asked, stroking Julie's sweaty hair. Julie didn't respond. Her breathing was returning to normal, but she couldn't take her eyes from the eagle protruding from her friend's chest. Julie, Wendy said again, shaking her sister. Look at me. Julie turned her head to look up into Wendy's face and gripped Wendy's hand. For all her sexy clothes and makeup and her precocious attitude, she looked exactly like she had when she was 5, getting ready to be wheeled in for a new round of surgeries and clutching at Wendy's fingers. What the hell is happening? Julie asked. It's complicated, Wendy said. Listen to me. I know you were on Devil's Flight with us that night. I'm not mad about that now, but I need to know. Perry was on the ride, wasn't she? It's extremely important." Julie looked up at her, confused. "What does that matter now?" Julie asked. Wendy, she's dead. Perry's dead." "I know, Julie," Wendy replied. "I know, and I'm sorry, but please answer the question. It's important." Julie looked very close to complete hysterical disintegration, but Wendy could see her trying to focus. "Yes," she finally admitted. "We got on the roller coaster, then got off when you started screaming about stuff." Wendy clenched her fist, air hissing between her teeth. Perry was part of the order, but what did it mean? Was she supposed to die before or after Julie? Had Kevin saved Julie from her fate? It certainly seemed like it. Or was Julie next? Or was Kevin? She looked up suddenly. Where was Kevin? She craned her neck and scanned the area, suddenly terribly afraid for him. The fairground was washed with brilliant, colorful light again as more fireworks exploded across the sky, and she saw Kevin, Polanski, and Clark dancing around the maddened white horse as they tried to catch its rope again. Amber stumbled over to Julie, a blank look of shock across her simple features. "Julie! Perry! Oh my God!" Wendy grabbed Amber's arm and pulled her down beside them. "Stay with Julie," Wendy hissed. "Kevin!" she cried, jumping up and racing toward him. "Be careful!" Kevin didn't hear her. He made a lunge for the rope, but the horse turned away from him, bucking and shooting out its hind legs. An iron-shod hoof caught Kevin square in the chest and kicked him back 5 yards, lifting him completely off his feet. Kevin crashed into the barbecue tent, flattening a folding table piled high with plates and utensils, and sending them flying in every direction as he rolled to a stop next to the grill. A barbecue fork spun through the air and punctured the fuel line of the propane tank under the flaming grill. Propane sprayed everywhere. The grill and everything around it burst into flames, setting the fat, sweating cook on fire. Kevin's face was brightly lit as it reflected the flames. He looked terrified, almost exactly like he had when Wendy had taken his picture at the amusement park. He sucked unsuccessfully for air, but the horse's kick had collapsed one of his lungs, and he could not fill it. His arms and legs would not obey him as he tried to make them work in coordination and get himself away from there. Bits of burning paper plates floated down toward the open fuel line. Kevin's eyes widened. It was going to blow. He tried again to struggle to his feet. He managed, but his head was spinning so bad he wasn't able to walk more than a few short steps. The fuel line began to shoot flame. Someone grabbed the back of his security jacket and hauled him back. It was Wendy. He was so glad to see her alive and well that he forgot all about the pain in his chest. He was shocked when she threw her arms around him and felt a hot sheet of pain flare up as she yanked him down on top of her. Behind them, the propane tank erupted in a ball of blue-white flame. Kevin and Wendy rolled away from the flames, barely escaping the edges of the deadly explosion. The tank shot off at an angle like a rocket, missing Kevin by inches. Wendy and Kevin continued to roll away, hair and clothes smoking. When they came to a stop, Wendy sat up slowly and looked around. Her hair was crisped on one side. The barbecue tent was on fire, and the cook was rolling on the ground, trying to put himself out. On the other side of the path, Clark and Polanski had recaptured the escaped horse and were lashing it to a sturdy lamppost. Julie was curled up in a fetal position beside Amber, covering her head and weeping. Amber was patting her back over and over like a broken robot, staring off into space with unseeing eyes. "Come on, Kevin," Wendy said, looking at him. "We have to get Julie and get the hell out of here." But Kevin was barely listening. He was staring up at the sky, his eyes glazed, wheezing like an asthmatic old man. His face was singed. He had blisters on his left cheek. His hair was smoking. His hand was pressed to his chest. "Kevin?" Wendy asked. "Kevin, are you okay?" Just need to catch my breath," he said. Oh, Christ, that hurts. Hang on, Kevin, Wendy said. I'll see if I can find a paramedic for you and for Julie. She craned her neck, looking around again. People were rushing away from the burning barbecue tent now. Others, official men in uniforms, were rushing towards it. Still others were simply staring at it, their attention pulled away from the fireworks in the sky by the earthbound explosion. "Can somebody help us?" she cried, reluctant to leave Kevin's side. "Can somebody get a paramedic?" Nobody looked her way. Everyone was focused on the blazing tent. Everyone except a figure in the center of the crowd was staring right at her. She focused on him, reaching out her arm. It was Ian McKinley. His eyes were wild with reflected fire. Wendy's arm dropped. She frowned at him, confused. Why was he staring at her like that? He took a step toward her. Had it been Ian who followed her? Suddenly she was horribly sure it had been. "Kevin?" she said, looking down, filled with dread and unease. "Yeah, I'm good," said Kevin. "Let's go." He tried to push himself up, but his arms wouldn't support his weight. Wendy turned toward Julie and Amber. Julie was sitting up now, and Amber was getting to her feet. "Amber! Julie!" she called. "Help me! Kevin needs help!" Julie looked up at her with wide, wet eyes. What's happening?" she sobbed. "Why is everything going crazy?" "I'll explain it once we get out of here, I promise," she said. "Amber, help me get Kevin on his feet. We have to go." Julie staggered to her feet and leaned against a tent pole while Amber stumbled over to them. The red-headed girl took Kevin's left arm as Wendy took his right, and they hauled him up. Kevin blinked around, dazed, trying to focus his eyes, and frowned. What is McKinley doing here?" he slurred. "He hates his family and everything about this town." Wendy froze and almost let go of Kevin. "McKinley," she said. "Oh my God, McKinley, of course." Kevin wove on his feet and nearly fell. Wendy clutched him again and got his arm over her shoulder. "We need to leave here now," she said. Her voice was sharp and hard. "Julie, come on!" Kevin turned to look at her, blinking and confused. "Huh?" he asked. "What's the deal?" Wendy whispered in his ear. "Ian followed me," she said. "In my picture, the one where I'm standing with Jason, we are wearing the McKinley grad night shirts. The way Jason's hand is on my shoulder, it looks like he's pointing to the word McKinley. Ian McKinley." Kevin's mouth dropped open. "Holy shit," he said. "Come on, let's move. The first aid station. There's got to be security." He leaned forward and Wendy and Amber guided him down the path while Julie followed close behind. Ian watched them and changed his course to pace them. They moved slowly down the slope toward the fireworks launch area and the security tent beyond. Julie frowned as she struggled to keep up with Wendy, Amber, and Kevin. What are you guys going on about?" she asked. "McKinley grad night shirt? I don't get it." "It's a long story," Wendy said over her shoulder, talking loudly over the constant explosions of the fireworks. "It sounds goofy as hell, but haven't you noticed how everybody who got off Devil's Flight before it crashed has died in order?" Julie's eyes went blank as she thought about it. Then they widened as she was hit by a realization. "And I was on the roller coaster," she cried, "next to Perry. That means I'm—" Wendy shook her head. "Maybe not," she said. "It looks like Kevin saved you. You might be safe." "Then you saved Kevin," Julie said. She stopped walking suddenly, and Amber stopped too, almost toppling Kevin. Julie stared at Wendy, eyes growing huge in her still, too pale face. "But that means you? "That means I'm next," Wendy said. "Right. And the other half of the weirdness is the pictures I took that night. They all seem to give clues on how the people in the pictures are going to die. Ashley and Ashlyn looked like they were on fire in theirs. Lewis looked like his head was going to be crushed. Frank had a fan that looked like it was slicing through his neck. Kevin's photo was all overexposed like a bomb went off in his face." "And you were wearing a McKinley t-shirt," said Julie, getting it. "With Jason pointing to the name McKinley. Oh my God!" "What are we talking about, kids?" asked Ian, appearing beside them suddenly. He sounded as cheerful as a kindergarten teacher, but there was a demented glint in his eyes. Kevin glared at him. "Get the fuck out of here, McKinley," he shouted over the noise. "I've had more than enough of your shit for one night." Ian made a mocked face. "What? Have I offended thee?" he asked with mock sincerity. "I'm just here to celebrate our beloved town's tricentennial, like the rest of our happy citizens." "You followed me," Wendy said, eyes narrow and hard. "Who? Moi?" Ian said. "You're getting paranoid." He laughed, a nasty sound. "Of course, I guess you've got reason to be. I saw everything that happened just now, and you're next, aren't you? Kevin saved your sister, you saved Kevin, so your number's up, isn't it? You're the end of it. When you're gone, it's done, unless somebody saves you." "I thought you said you didn't believe me," Wendy said bitterly. "Seeing is believing," Ian replied. 20 nails through Aaron's face was pretty fucking convincing. The veins in his neck were pulsing. "Well, if you believe me," she said, "you have to stay away from me." "Yeah, asshole," Kevin said, voice more breathless than badass. "Beat it." "I have to stay away from you?" Ian said, frowning. "Who died and made you Death's stage manager? Why do I—" He paused as a realization struck him. "Wait a minute. Do I cause your death?" "No way!" He laughed hysterically. "Well, isn't that poetic justice? Isn't that just a perfect fucking circle?" He snarled at Wendy. "Tit for tat, right? Eye for an eye. I cause your death, the way you caused Aaron's." They all jumped as 3 mortars fired right next to them, fireworks whooshing up into the sky. They had reached the plastic barricades that had been Kevin's post before all the chaos had started. None of them noticed that the flatbed trailer was angling down a little more every time one of its mortars fired. Ian shouted as the fireworks exploded overhead. "Was I in one of your visions, Wendy? What did you see?" Wendy tried desperately to ignore him. She looked forward, toward the first aid station, only 20 yards ahead. Paramedics and security officers were carrying Perry's body and the body of the burned cook inside, while others with more injuries waited outside. Wendy thought of shouting to the guards for help, but they wouldn't hear her over all the explosions. She kept walking, doggedly urging Kevin forward. Ian looked ahead and saw where they were heading. He stepped in front of them, blocking their path. Amber gasped and stepped back, letting go of Kevin. Wendy staggered as Kevin's full weight hit her, but she bore it up, angry now, chin up and defiant. "Was I in one of your magic photos, Wendy?" Ian asked. "Was I in your photo? Was I in front of a tent?" Wendy veered Kevin to the right, angling away from the fireworks launch area as Amber and Julie tried to edge around Ian. He shuffled in front of them again, laughing. "Come on, Wendy," Ian said. "Isn't this exciting? Isn't the tension killing you? Don't you want to finish it? Just tell me how I started off. His moment of villainous menace was marred somewhat when a clump of loose mylar balloons bumped into him and hugged his face. He batted them angrily away. "God damn it! Let's get it over with, now!" Most of the jaunty balloons drifted behind him, bobbing over the plastic barricade and then drooping and rolling across the ground toward the flatbed-mounted mortars. One hung around Wendy's legs like a needy puppy. "It'll be over if you just stay away from me," Wendy said, pleading. "Then it'll all be over and none of us will have to worry anymore." The mylar balloons bumped against the flatbed trailer. A gust of wind pushed them up and they bounced toward the electronic matches. The matches were bare wires screwed into a plank, with simple open switches waiting for a pulse of electricity to complete the circuit and light the fuse. One of the balloons landed lightly on both sides of one switch, and the silver coating of the mylar balloons closed the circuit. Sparks flew, popping the balloons, and a fuse lit. "It's already over for me," Ian said. "It skipped me. I'm not dying, but I don't want it to be over for you." "You're sick," Wendy said, grimacing. "I didn't do anything to you." Flames belched from the largest mortar on the flatbed. Wendy jumped and looked behind her. The forlorn mylar balloon blocked her view, and then floated in front of her. She pushed at it, annoyed, and froze as she saw in its mirror finish the reflection of herself standing with Kevin, draping his arm over her shoulder. She recognized the pose, but where from? It struck her. She had been standing in exactly the same pose with Jason in her grad night picture. A shiver of nauseous dread ran through her. Her death was near. It had to be, but where? The force of the big fireworks exhaust at last unbalanced the flatbed completely, and it tipped down to the ground like a seesaw. The heavy mortar frame slid down the incline and tipped over until the mortar tubes were parallel with the ground, and the openings were pointing right at Wendy, Kevin, Amber, and Julie's backs. The flaccid mylar balloon settled across all the electronic matches on the board. Sparks flew, and all the remaining fuses lit at once. Wendy turned at the hiss of the fuses just in time to see 4 mortar tubes erupt with flame, launching fireworks straight at her. She screamed and dropped, dragging Kevin and Julie with her. They collapsed in a pile on the grass as the 4 rockets screamed over them, cascading sparks, and shot directly at Ian. He froze in shock, eyes wide, but at the last second the fireworks veered up and arced into the sky, missing him by inches. Wendy, Kevin, and Julie looked up, amazed to see Ian still standing. Down near the security tent, Clark and Polanski looked up at the sudden noise and light. Ian remained motionless for a moment, deeply unnerved by his close call. But then he relaxed and grinned, pointing a triumphant finger at Wendy. "See?" he said, cackling maliciously. "See? I'm not gonna die. It's you, Wendy. You're next. You're dead!" The 4 fireworks exploded together next to the towering cherry picker crane, holding the large McKinley Tricentennial sign high over Ian's head. The blast sheared the cable holding the cherry picker's basket, over which the sign was draped, and the basket dropped straight toward Ian. He looked up and raised his hands over his head, wrist crossing in the shape of an X. The basket hit him square in the forehead and pile drove him into the ground. Blood welled up around the frame of the basket, which had buried itself 2 feet deep into the soft earth. One of Ian's pale hands poked limply out from the side of the basket until the sign fluttered down and covered it. The word McKinley marking Ian's final resting place in yard-high letters. Wendy, Kevin, and Julie got slowly to their feet, staring at yet another gruesome accident and edging away. Amber was edging back and then suddenly bolted away into the crowd. As Wendy stepped back, her foot hit something hard. She looked down. The yearbook camera that Julie had borrowed earlier lay at her feet. She picked it up as warily as if picking up a tarantula. Julie looked at it and flinched. "I didn't take any pictures, I swear," she said. "I'll take it back Monday." Wendy hesitated, then shook her head. She threw it down again and stomped on it. It cracked and bent with the snapping of plastic and metal as she ground it under her feet. "Forget it," Wendy said. "It's broken." Julie nodded and exchanged a half smile with her sister. "Good fucking riddance," Kevin said. Wendy looked at him and slipped under his arm again. "Are you all right?" she asked. He nodded as Julie tucked under his other arm, and they limped forward. "Yeah," he said. "I'll be fine as long as you're fine. Everything's under control now, Wendy. It's over." As they limped toward the first aid tent, a pair of paramedics hurried toward them, and Clark and Polanski ran toward the cherry picker basket and Ian's body. Wendy breathed a sigh of relief. The feeling of foreboding was gone. The nightmare was over. Kevin was right. Everything was under control again. All she had to worry about from now on was plain old ordinary life. A sudden bright white light flashed behind her. She paused and looked back. The crushed camera lens winked at her. The electronic flash was fading to red. Her blood ran cold. This couldn't be happening. It was over. Everybody that got off the roller coaster had already had their brush with death, and either died or survived. It had skipped her and Julie and Kevin and... A sudden, horrible realization nearly stopped her heart. Ian had thought it skipped him, but he had died after all, hands up in the shape of an X, just like in his photo. Maybe it didn't skip anyone. Maybe the order of deaths was still preserved. She thought back to what Ian had said in the Homeland warehouse. There was no reason to think that the people on the roller coaster had died in that exact order that they were sitting. Some of them might have hung on for a few seconds or even minutes before their hearts stopped and their higher brain functions ceased. Even though Perry was sitting behind Ian and Aaron, Ian might have hung on just a little bit longer, long enough to have breathed his last just seconds after she did. And if that was the case, then Julie and Kevin and Wendy were still fair game. Worse, they no longer had any idea who was going to die first. It could be any one of them. It wasn't over, after all. Okay, Slashaholics, this has been Final Destination 3, the novelization of the film by Christa Faust. I don't know what else I can say about this book that I haven't already said. If you go back and listen to the chapter by chapters, that's if you are listening to the unabridged version now. Christa Faust is just an amazing author. She took this movie that, yes, it is one of the better sequels, but it's not really a memorable movie by any means, not as memorable, say, the first and second, or the Final Destination. But she took this story and made me, personally, care for these characters and get invested in these main characters. And I just love her writing style. She could write a book with no action scenes whatsoever, no deaths, none of that, and I would still be hooked just on her characters. She is so good at fleshing out characters and just pulling you into the story and making you part of it. But as far as the final destination of it all goes, I thought she wrote the roller coaster scene superbly. The way that she wrote these characters dealing with the loss of their girlfriend, their boyfriend, and then finding each other and getting closer throughout the book. I felt that way more in the book than I ever did in the movie. And, you know, it's just shows how good she is at what Christa does. The way that these characters slowly started to figure out what was going on and that their life was not saved yet just because they got off that ride. You know, they started piecing everything together. And I love the whole picture aspect of it. That was a really cool thing for the franchise. And Christa, again, really nailed that one too with her writing. You know, as Wendy and Kevin slowly start figuring out that these pictures are giving them hints at how their friends are going to die and how they're going to die with Death's new plan. Which, I mean, why Death would give them hints, I don't know, but it kind of makes you wonder if there aren't signs all around us all the time that we're just not seeing, you know? Wonder how many times we've had near-death experiences just because our subconscious saw some kind of sign and our gut reacted without us even, you know, muscle memory and saved ourselves. It's crazy. The death scenes were carried out really good. One of them, I know some people felt a bit cheated, and that was the scene with Lewis in the gym. But after that, I mean, yeah, that one was kind of toned down from the movie, but I kind of figured that that's like, when they were making the movie, they added a few things, and the novelization was already written by that point. But I thought it was okay. But then after that, like with Aaron's death, wow, so brutal, so well written, just so much suspense and stuff in this book. Even though we know the story, even though I know the story, I was still enthralled by the characters and the story and where it was going, and I could not wait to see what happened. And I gotta say, the conclusion of the book, like the last 30 or so pages from this narration, was just, I hate to use this pun, but it was like a roller coaster ride. It really was. It's like Christa, was trying to be ironic with her writing here, and she went from a literal roller coaster in the beginning, and then the last chapter was like a metaphorical roller coaster ride, because that's what it felt like reading this chapter. And I hope you guys felt it too by listening to it. But yeah, this whole book has just been an amazing experience for me. I cannot praise Christa Faust enough. She has become one of my favorite authors after reading The Jason Strain, Dreamspawn, Final Destination 3. I cannot wait to read her other books in the Black Flame series. I'm looking forward to that. And I will be doing Final Destination 1 and 2, and Final Destination, Destination 0, and Final Destination Into the Line. That's the 4 remaining Final Destination books that are out of print. I've done, let's see here, Dead Man's Hand, Dead Reckoning, Death of the Senses, Looks Could Kill, and now we've completed Final Destination 3. So we're really knocking this franchise out, and it's been so much fun doing these books. At first, I wasn't sure, since I kind of had like a slasher theme going for the channel, but the channel's evolved, and Final Destination was the first step in that evolution of taking, going in the other directions with novelizations and tie-ins, like Demon Knight, Gremlins, stuff like that. But yeah, let's break down some characters here. Ian, I based on somebody I really knew, especially in the Home Depot type scene, when he's just being so smarmy and such a jackass, and it's like everything he's saying is like with air quotes around it. I based that off a real D-bag I used to know back when I was in high school. I don't know why, but when Ian was slipping into insanity and going, nuts at the end of the book, for some reason a little bit of Chucky came out, of like the voice I do for Chucky. I don't know, it's just what I was feeling, and it came out in the voice. Sometimes I can't control it. It's just where the book takes me. I wasn't trying to make him sound just like him. It was a little bit of that edginess in there, that little bit of psychotic nature, But yeah, all the deaths played out really good. I would have enjoyed getting to get the subway scene with the whole, there was someone playing over the speakers. But that was added after the novelization was written. That was added to the movie. So I did hear somebody said there's a fan-written, epilogue for this book that is the subway scene. If you want to email that to me at larues.exe@gmail.com, it's LARUES.exe@gmail.com. I will definitely narrate it on the channel, and I can't put it with the unabridged version because Christa Faust didn't write it, but I will put it in the playlist with the other chapter uploads of this book, and mark it as fan fiction epilogue for Final Destination 3. I can do that. If you guys would like me to do that, I will do it. But I thought the ending was pretty ominous the way it stood. Yeah, we didn't get to see him dying, but that feeling of unknowing and uneasiness that she was feeling when she realized this was not over. They did not end it. They're going to have to go for it. Was a very ominous ending, and I thought it worked on its own. I really did. The subway scene is fun, and it's fun to set up the end credits of the movie, but I don't think the book needed it. I thought the ending was pretty ominous the way it stood. And this whole last chapter has just been perfect. It was just up and down action. You could not even catch your breath. Literally, a couple characters had a hard time catching their breath. But yeah, I cannot wait to hear what all of you slashaholics thought of this book. I've done some more detailed discussions on it on the individual chapter uploads you can find in the playlist for Final Destination 3, the novelization. after each of those like 1 to 3 chapter upload narrations, I did discussions on what I read. So I did a lot more detail there than I have in this one. This is going to be on the conclusion chapter upload, and also what you're hearing now will be on the unabridged version. But yeah, I mean, I just can't say enough good about this book. The characters were well written, so like almost felt like real people. I really cared for Wendy and Kevin. I wanted to see them make it. I wanted to see them be happy. We did get a really hot shower scene at one point in the book that was a little wow. But yeah, that kind of caught me off guard, where Kevin and Wendy had to act like they were getting it on in the shower, so people didn't know they were involved with Lewis's death. A couple little things I didn't enjoy about the ending is I would have liked to have seen Polanski and Clark involved more than they were in the book, because it's like she threw in extra stuff with them in the book, but then when the ending came, they went from being really interesting characters that I wanted to know more about and see what they actually did, to just becoming horse wranglers. That's really what they became in the end of the book. And even after the horse was wrangled, we didn't really get much more from them. Like, I was hoping to have some dialogue where they're like, all right, we know y'all haven't been killing people. We see it now, something like that, where they're, questioning what it is they saw that night here at the fireworks show, the tricentennial thing. But yeah, guys, totally. Let me know in the comment section below what you thought of Final Destination 3, the novelization by Christa Faust. And I'll be back very soon with some more out-of-print horror content and audiobook narrations here on the channel soon. Until then, this has been your friendly neighborhood 80s slasher librarian saying thanks for listening, be excellent to each other, and I'll see you soon. As always, tonight's upload is brought to you by our patrons on the Patreon page. I want to say thank you to each and every single one of them. Thank you, Jake Hutemaker, Tony DeVore, Seminole, Tyrone Kennard, Nick Velcarve, Jeffrey Quick, Daniel Mackey, David Arnold, Alex Vanover, Krista Campbell, Rob Davey, Jay Gardner, Willow Ravenwood, Lauren Vaught, Kristen Kay, Michael, William Schaefer, Liam Anderson, Bonanza Jellybean, Bree, Ryan Woodward, Allison Seib, Iron Alexa, Hawaii, Cecilia Spears, Sean Campbell, Catherine McClear, and Carl Eakins. I know a lot of YouTubers just put up like a text scroll thing with the names listed, but I want to take the time to actually say thank you in my own voice to all of you, because this channel would not exist without you. I love each and every single one of you. Thank you so much. And if anybody listening would like to support the channel, you can go to the Patreon. The link is in the description below. You can sign up for as low as $2 per month. All the tiers come with awesome rewards, including free ebooks, free merch. You can voice characters in audiobooks, come on the podcast, all kinds of stuff. Just check it out. I think you'll really enjoy the rewards, and you'll be helping make sure this channel is still here for years to come. Also, be sure to check out the merch store. The link is in the description below. Be sure to use the promo code 10OFF to get 10% off all purchases on the merch store. And be sure to sign up for the Facebook group. Check us out on Twitter, Instagram, all that. All that's in the description below. We'd love to have you. And thanks for listening.